Hello and welcome to the show. Now, one of the cool things that Gran Turismo 6 has is it has go-karts. You can go go-kart racing. There are a couple of go-kart tracks. I'm not entirely sure. I presume that this here has been built specifically for a go-kart track. There is another indoor go-kart track as well. However, we can't use the indoor one because that doesn't allow normal road cars to run around it. You can only use go-karts. And for today, I'm going to be messing about with some road cars on a go-kart track. I could go go-kart racing, but in single player the AI is a bit boring, so that wouldn't be any fun. So instead, what I'm going to do is take a go-kart around, see what lap time a go-kart can do. Then I'm going to take various different road cars to begin with. There are going to be two parts to this as I started editing this and realised how long it was going to be. So this is going to be a two-part. We're going to start comparing the go-kart lap times to road car lap times and see how they compare. I'm expecting the go-kart to be quicker, as this is the fastest go-kart you can get in the game. It's the 125 shifter. It's really rather fast. It is a very, very fast car, but I'm interested to see how the road cars compare. Of course, this is the go-kart's home territory, if you like. It's a little thing, very, very light, not massively powerful. I'm not actually sure how much power this thing has. Not massively powerful, but it doesn't weigh anything, so it doesn't matter. It's an interesting thing to drive. It takes a bit of getting used to. This is just ignore. You didn't see anything. Nothing at all happened there. Yeah, it's an interesting thing getting used to driving. Getting used to driving this kart. They are a little bit twitchy. They're a little bit slidey. You've got to have a little bit of a different driving style for these. They are, because this one here is quite blooming fast. It's a little bit on the tricky side to drive, but you'll get used to it. You have got to be aware of the curbs around here. The curbs are pretty big, and while not that big for a car, they do sort of mess up a go-kart. So yeah, got to be cautious on the curbs. However, this thing is mighty, mighty fast. Up first, for the road cars, we have a Honda Fit. What a better place to start than with my mighty, mighty Honda. In fact, the reason why I am using this car, actually, there's two reasons. First of all, it was this car that gave me the idea to do this as a sort of a challenge, because one of the season events sees you driving the Honda Fit around a go-kart track, and I was wondering how other cars would compare. And the other reason why I am using this is I was curious to see if something sort of small, light, well, fairly light, fairly nimble, could actually embarrass any of the bigger, heavier supercars and race cars, not race cars, but sort of the supercars and the fellow road cars. I didn't know. I have no idea how the times were going to compare. So I threw out the Honda Fit to see how it goes. This, after all the stick that I gave this car, is not that bad. No, they're not the most exciting of the hot hatches in the world, but it's not bad. It handles okay. Of course, it's not particularly fast. It's got, what has it got, 117 horsepower, only weighs 1,000 kilos, which for modern cars is not bad. Yeah, it's quite an agile, quite a nimble little car, and yeah, I do quite like it. Of course, it hasn't got the power of some of the other cars, but handling wise, yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Does all right for a hot hatch. We have the complete opposite to the Honda Fit up next. It is a Shelby GT500 Mustang. This isn't very nimble and isn't very agile. It is very, very slidey. Yeah, it does that quite a lot. Yeah, not the most sophisticated of cars is this. It's got some 600 odd horsepower, and this is not a track designed for a Mustang or a muscle car of any sort. It's not really a surprise, is it? This is a very tight, very twisty track, and these cars are not the best handling in the world, and this has got an awful lot of understeer. I was having quite a few problems getting it turned in to the lower speed corners, and then of course when you do try and put the power down, you just get that. You get much oversteer, and this is me trying to be cautious with the cars as well. It's so easy to bin it on that final corner. All of the cars here, I should point out, were run without assists. They were all given 5 minutes to set their fastest lap. 5 minutes works out to around 10 or 11 laps. So yeah, they all get a fair shot. I have to limit it time wise because otherwise it can go on forever, and these take blooming long to film as it is. Yeah, Mustang was an absolute pain to drive. It was kind of entertaining driving this around here, but no, it really wasn't very easy. Next car, this is an interesting one. I'm not entirely sure if it's road legal. I believe it is. It's also not really sort of a proper race car, so I'm going to put this as a road car. This is I think it's Light Car Company Rocket, and this it's a strange thing, and I love it. It's a really cool car. I believe the only other game I've ever seen it in is PGR4. I think that's where it is, or PGR3. It's one of the Project Gotham racing games this thing's in. Has absolutely no straight line speed. It tops out at 120, 130, I think. But it has really good handling and really good acceleration, which is exactly what you need around a track like this. I do like this car. It's great fun to drive. You just point it at the corner, it'll go. There's no understeer. The only slight niggle with it is there is a lack of rear downforce. If there was a big wing on this thing, I think it would be amazing. But yeah, there is no rear downforce, and it can be a little bit slidey when you really push it. But I mean, it weighs 390 kilos. Yeah, that's pretty damn light. It has 165 horsepower. Yeah, very, very little weight, not a huge amount of power. Makes for a fun car, and this is a great fun car to drive. I really do like it. Up next we have, I think this is a Nissan GTR killer, this thing. I really do like this car as well. It's the Tommykaira, I don't know how the person's name's pronounced who makes this. It is a ZZII. Not the most exciting of names, I will be honest, but no, this thing is mighty, mighty fast around a normal racetrack. 542 horsepower, four-wheel drive, weighs 1,000 kilos, so about a ton. This thing is quicker than a Nissan GTR, and it's cheaper as well. I really like it. It's a great car. It's also a very good looking car. I want one. It's incredibly fast around a normal track. The slight downside to running it in a place like this is because it is four-wheel drive, it is a little bit understeery, and through some of the faster corners where you want to get more power down, it can struggle a little bit with that understeer. Although the flip side of being four-wheel drive is it means you can get good launch out of each of the corners, which is kind of important. Like you saw with the Mustang that was floundering around all over the place, having that four-wheel drive in this is quite nice through some of the very low-speed corners. You can be a little bit more aggressive with the throttle in this car, and it won't bite you and try to kill you. Yeah, I really like this car. It is an excellent car to drive. Yeah, the final corner was proving a little bit tricky. You could still get it out of shape if you really tried, but on the most part, this was a very well-behaved car. You'll also notice there's a little bit of a scratch on the back of it where I may have dinged it in the wall on the final corner. Now, this is another interesting car. This is the Mercedes, what is it, AMG Vision GT thing. I believe it's a concept car made. Is it a concept car made for this game? I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, this is an odd car. It's a huge, great big thing. I thought this was going to be a real handful through the corners. It actually wasn't that bad. I'm not sure what powers it. I'm not entirely sure what engine's in this thing, but it's a proper petrol engine. It makes lots of noise and isn't a silly electric motor. So I like this as a concept car. I think it's really cool looking from the front. From the rear it looks a little bit odd, but from the front it's kind of cool. Yeah, this is a massive, great big car. I expected it to really struggle around this track, but it was very well behaved on the most part. I mean, yeah, you've got to be careful with the throttle. You have to be with all of the cars, but no, this one was really not too bad to drive. As far as specification wise go, yeah, this is one of the heavier road cars that we have here, 1,385 kilos, but it's got a lot of power, 576 to be precise. I think it might even be the most powerful road car, is it? Yeah, I believe it is the most powerful road car we have here. It's a nice car to drive. I was amazed how well it handles, considering its size, its weight, and the fact that we're driving it on a little go-kart track. Yeah, it was a nice car, and I think it was very cool looking. Now, this is a glorified go-kart. I was expecting the KTM X-Bow to go rather quickly around here because, yeah, it's pretty much a track day car. It also comes in orange and black, which is always a good thing. Now, I drove one of these on Forza 5, and I wasn't a massive fan of this car in particular. It was much like a lot of the cars in Forza 5, it was very sort of oversteering, and I didn't think it should be. On here, it has a little bit of the same problem. Maybe it's just the way the KTM is in real life. I thought these cars were a lot more planted. But yeah, it does slide around a little bit. Can be a little bit of a pain through some of the corners. Of course, through the low speed stuff, it's excellent. It's when you're trying to put the power down, it does like to slide around a little bit. I mean, that's partly down to the fact that this thing doesn't weigh very much, and it's partly down to the fact that it has, well, I wouldn't say a lot of power, but it's fairly powerful for the sort of car it is. Yeah, it's an interesting car to drive. You can get some very quick lap times. Again, you've got to be careful with the curbs, much like with the go-kart actually. This one here didn't really like clattering that curb. On the final corner, they have to be careful with quite a few of the cars. But yeah, it's an agile car. You can see it through there. Even when I got things a little bit wrong, you can kind of rescue it. it's an okay car to drive. It was a little bit trickier than I thought it was going to be. It's a little bit more slidey than ideally I would have liked. You could do with a big wing on the back of it. Give it some rear downforce. I think this car would be amazing. It would probably rival the likes of Lotus 211. But yeah, as it is, a little bit tricky to drive as I get very sideways before I go across the line. But it was quite entertaining. Up next, this one was a little bit of a disappointment. Is the Caterham 7 Fireblade, I believe, as I have a little bit of a spin. Yeah, it was. I didn't have very many crashes with these cars. It was that corner. If I spun a car, it was either that corner or the final corner, where I was just trying to go a little bit too fast, and it ran out of grip. Yeah, I was expecting the Caterham to be very, very good handling. These Caterhams, and there's a Lotus 7 and all of that kind of car, are well known for being great handling. And this one was okay. However, I believe this is a version with a Honda Fireblade. Is it a Honda Fireblade? I know nothing about bikes. So, a Fireblade bike engine, I believe, is what powers this car. And it has stupidly long gear ratios. I mean, ridiculously long. It will do, I think it's 80 miles an hour in first gear. So just about the point you want to change up from first to second in this car, you're about to brake for the first corner. The gear ratios are a little bit too long, and that kind of ruins the fun with this. It feels very, very sluggish through the low-speed corners. Now, admittedly, by having the long gears, when you sort of come to try and put the power down, you don't have as many problems with wheel spin, although this car doesn't have a huge amount of power to start with. It's got 157 horsepower. But yeah, with the long gears you don't have the wheel spin problem, but it does feel very, very sluggish. And I think that compromised this car a little bit. Not too bad through the corners, can be a little bit slidey. But yeah, the gearing was a bit of a disappointment. Up next, of course, we couldn't be doing a sort of a tiny track challenge without using a Lotus Elise. And I was expecting to see this do really well. I was expecting this to put in some impressive lap times and scare the likes of the supercars. However, it didn't have the lap times. It was a lovely car to drive. This car is one of the best handling cars in the world from stock for a road car. It's an excellent car to drive. And that would be because it weighs very little. 755 kilos. For a sort of a full-size road car, that is not very much. Okay, you look at the likes of the Rocket and the Caterham, yeah, they weigh practically nothing because they're a track car. But for this thing, yeah, it doesn't weigh very much. However, it also is the least powerful car here at 118 horsepower. So you look at the power to weight ratio on this car, 118 horsepower to 700 and whatever kilos, and you look at the Caterham, 150 horsepower to 369 kilos. Yeah, this car struggles on acceleration. It is lovely through the corners. It's an incredibly planted car. You can get it sideways if you're a bit of an idiot and try and take too much speed into a corner. I think this is what I'm about to do here. No, maybe it was in a previous attempt. Yeah, you can get it too sideways if you take too much speed. But on the most part, this was the easiest car, I think, to drive here. Out of everything I drove, this was the easiest of the road cars. Lovely handling, just doesn't have that acceleration. Could have done with another 100 horsepower probably, and then this would be an amazing car for this sort of challenge. As it is, yeah, it struggled a little bit around this track. Up next is the Lamborghini Gallardo. I think it's an LP 560. This is a very nice car to drive, and I wasn't expecting to say that. This was probably the biggest surprise of the lot. I was thinking this is a big, heavy four-wheel drive, well, not too big, but a fairly big, heavy four-wheel drive supercar that would struggle to get turned around any of these corners, as we have smoke billowing off the front tyres on that occasion. Yeah, I was really expecting this car to be a nightmare around this sort of a track. It's really not what a Lamborghini is designed for. However, it was really rather good. I am amazed at how well this car got turned for these low-speed corners. The final corner could be a little bit tricky, much like with the ZZII or whatever the damn thing is called. That final corner is a bit of a pain for some of the four-wheel drive cars. However, everywhere else, it was really good at low-speed turning. It was very agile, considering well, it's, what is it, 1,400 kilos, and it wasn't quite as agile as the Elise, but it did really rather well. I was amazed by this car. Lovely car to drive. Of course, it sounds amazing and everything like that. Yeah, I was stunned at how good this car is. Okay, you can get it sideways a little bit if you're a bit of a fool with the throttle, and understeer could prove a bit problematic, and you've got to be careful with the blue-in brakes getting the thing stopped into the first corner, because this thing does accelerate very, very quickly. I don't think any of the road cars hit 100 miles an hour around this track. I don't think the Gallardo got close, but I don't think it quite did it. This next car, this couldn't do it either. This one got very close, but I got scared and had to put on the brakes before I could test it. This is the final car, and this is a big, modern, scary supercar, the Pagani Huayra. This is not fun. This is not fun at all to drive around here. The Shelby Mustang was difficult. I think this might even be more difficult. Is that a word? I don't know. It is now. This was really tough to drive around this track because it has an awful lot of power, and well, it just has ridiculous amounts of power. I think 700 something horsepower. Yeah, this was a tough one. Much like with the Mustang, it had a bit of low speed understeer, not as bad as the Mustang, but the real problem with this is just trying to put the power down anywhere, because there is so much of it trying to escape through the rear wheels. It was a nightmare trying to control it. I think this footage is taken from the early runs where I was trying to get a feel for what the car could do. Yeah, it was really tough to drive this car. I've often said that one of the best ways to learn to drive in a video game with traction control off is turn it off in a V8 supercar. If you can drive a V8 supercar without traction control, you can drive anything. I reckon this would also be a pretty good test of throttle control. If you can drive a Pagani Huayra or an equally stupidly powerful rear-wheel drive supercar around a go-kart track, you can probably drive anything with traction control off, because it does that so easy. There is such a fine line in getting this car just around this track. I'm not necessarily talking about getting this car around this track fast, just merely getting it around the track without having a big accident. Yeah, you have to have so much throttle control with it. And it's a bit of a shame with this car, because there is so much power. If I can get a good run out of this final corner, it was ridiculously fast accelerating onto the back straight, but you just can't use any of the power, and it does that an awful lot if you're a little bit too brave. Anyway, I didn't have any major crashes with any of the cars. They were all fairly well behaved. I had a couple of spins and a couple of bumps in the wall on the second to last corner, but yeah, they were all fairly well behaved. Anyway, it is on to the lap times. The go-kart, unsurprisingly, I never expected these stuff to beat the go-kart, did a 27.001. The KTM Crossbow is the fastest road car that we tested, with a 29, over 2 seconds slower than that of the go-kart, and only, what is that, 6,000th of a second faster than the Rocket. That Rocket is an amazing car. That's a huge amount of fun to drive. I really recommend you have a go with it. I believe you get it from one of the Goodwood Festival of Speed events when you get gold in I think it's the second round of them. You get given that car. It's huge fun. On a short track, that car is excellent. The Mercedes Vision GT was 4th. I was astounded by how quick that thing got around there, considering it's a big massive thing with quite a lot of power and quite heavy. Yeah, that did really rather well. The Gallardo also was pretty impressive going into 5th. The Caterham, yeah, it's still a lightweight, nimble little thing despite the rather silly gears. If that had sort of shorter, more normal gears, I think that thing could have been a lot higher up. That could have probably challenged the KTM. While the Tommykaira, whatever it's called, I still like that car. Yeah, struggled a little bit. Not quite as fast as the Gallardo. Well, I say not quite as fast, as like a 10th off. Yeah, I do recommend that car. It's really good value for money. Pagani Huayra struggled as expected. Just couldn't put the power down with that thing. Not really a surprise though. Lotus Elise, I was surprised by how slow, or how, not so much slow, but yeah, that did struggle on the leaderboard. The Shelby GT500, unsurprisingly, was down towards the back. And the Honda Fit, well, it tried. It was quite fun around this track, but yeah, it didn't cause any major surprises. Anyway, that is it for part 1 of this video. It's quite good fun driving these. I do like trying to drive these cars around this track. It's kind of a nice flowing track, very rhythmical, and once you get started, there are a couple of times I forgot to look at the clock and I'll be going far longer than I'd intended. Those lap times are already from the first 5 minutes. Yeah, some of these cars, it's good fun. It's surprising how fun it is driving these around a go-kart track. Anyway, hopefully tomorrow, I'm not sure, unless technology fails us, tomorrow there will be the video with the race cars having a go around here. That was quite fun and interesting. However, that is it for today, so until next time, goodbye.